Over 30 years ago, I began my study of the rich and successful people. Of course, not all rich people are successful, and not all successful people are rich. But I remember at that stage I was young, more naive, and I wanted everything. And over the years, I've spent a lot of time studying them. And I guess for the last decade or more, I've been mentoring a lot of very successful property investors, business people, entrepreneurs, and along the way, I've become much more successful too. And I've written about it in my books and my blogs, and we discuss these topics in this monthly Rich Habits, Poor Habits podcast that runs on the first Thursday of every month in between my regular weekly Michael Yardney podcast. Last session, we started a series that's going to run for a couple of months because there are so many of the habits. We started a series of the success habits of the rich. It was such a popular podcast. We're going to continue on today. So welcome to this show.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's most trusted property commentator, who has once again been voted our leading expert in wealth creation. That's the 5th time he's won a similar award in the last 7 years.
Why do the rich keep getting richer? What do successful people do differently? Now, if you've listened to my podcast, read my blogs, you know that being rich has very little to do with money itself. It's a lot more to do with how you think about money. And in these monthly Rich Habits, Poor Habits podcasts I do with Tom Corley, we share with you the habits, the traits of successful people, of rich people. So last session, we started to talk about the many different rich habits that the wealthy people have. And we're going to continue on today. I've got on the other line, on the other side of the world actually, Tom Corley in New Jersey while I'm in Australia. Hello, Tom.
It's good to be here in Australia, my friend.
Well, you are virtually, and I know you come every year, and I look really forward to catching up with you again in a couple of months when we got Wealth Retreat 2019. Now, we got a lot of good feedback on our podcast from last month as we went through so many of the rich habits and the traits of successful people and how different they are. And just to remind listeners, if you haven't looked, go back to iTunes and look at the Rich Habits, Poor Habits podcast, or go to Tom's website or mine and have a look at last month's podcast where we outlined the 13, 14 success traits, habits of wealthy people. We're going to continue on doing that today. And the reason is so that you understand how the wealthy people think, what they do, how they behave, so that you can become one of them. And one of the traits we've noticed in both our individual studies, and it's interesting how doing it at different parts of the world, we've ended up with similar results, we've recognized that the poor people believe that money will make them happier, while rich people know that money actually has little to do with happiness. Sure, it makes life a lot easier and more enjoyable, but there's lots more to being rich than just money.
Yeah, money buys you freedom. So it allows you to do things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. And sometimes those, it's pursuing things that you put off while you were accumulating your wealth. So yes, money doesn't necessarily make you happier, but it gives you the opportunity to create happiness events. You do a big trip in December every year. We go to Long Beach Island every summer. Those are happiness events. We have family surrounding us, and thank God we have enough money that we can afford to do that. So money does those things. It gives you the opportunity to really enjoy your life and have some freedom.
Well, I think the point in some ways is that as people get a bit more money, it doesn't always make them happier. So you've got to make your life happier. And it's not by things you own and possessions you have, is it, Tom? It really has a lot more to do with your experiences.
You hit the nail on the head there. So there's research on this. There's studies on this, a happiness study that I referenced in our last podcast on the twins study. They they found that 50% of your happiness is genetic, and the other 50% is made up of 40% activities, what you do. So if you could be super rich and have a happiness baseline that makes you average happy, but you do nothing. You do absolutely nothing, so you're miserable. And then you could have somebody who's in the middle class who has an average happiness baseline, but they have all of these different activities that they engage in that don't necessarily require the expenditure of money. And they're super happy. So activities make you happy. And what wealth does is it gives you the opportunity to engage in more happiness activities than if you're poor.
Another trait we have found amongst the rich is that they don't blame other people. They take responsibility for their actions and their outcomes. And to be honest, they take responsibility for their lack of actions and the outcomes that come from that. They know that there's no such thing as a rich victim, while the average person seems to blame other people. They're a victim. It's not their fault.
Yeah, that victim ideology, that victim mindset holds you back. It's a limiting belief. It's a negative belief. It's born in negativity. And one of the attributes of successful people is positivity. So if you're continuously blaming others, you're living in negativity. It's never going to help you become successful. You have to take responsibility for your life. Stop blaming your parents. Stop blaming your spouse. Stop blaming everybody. It's you and you alone that are responsible. You're the CEO of your life.
Well, following on from that, the poor believe it's wrong for a small group of people, that 1% that they keep talking about, to possess most of the money. Now, the rich think differently. They welcome the masses. They want the 99% to join them. But in fact, when you look at the 1%, most of the people listening to this podcast are already the 1% when you take into account the general wealth in the world.
Yes, you said it there. Wealthy people want more people to be wealthy. Why? Well, just think about it. If you're a wealthy boat manufacturer and only 1% of the population can afford to buy your boats, wouldn't it be really awesome if 10% could afford to buy your boats? You'd be even wealthier. So yeah, wealthy people want more people to be wealthy because that'll help everybody become richer.
Now, an interesting trait of successful people is that they're not necessarily more talented than the majority. They're not necessarily more intelligent than the majority, yet they always find a way to maximize their potential. They find a way to get more out of themselves. They use what they have got, what talents they have got, what intelligence they have got more effectively.
Yeah, and this is, in my research, I found that almost 40% of the self-made millionaires were either D or C students. Now, how on earth, if you're a C or D student, the society tells you you're not very smart, right? Well, how is it possible that all these C and D students are becoming wealthy? Well, it's because, being smart has very little to do with being wealthy and successful. What I found in my research is what makes successful people successful is they never stop learning. They're always learning every single day. They make it a habit to learn, and they focus like a laser on what they do for a living and learn everything about that. And so that in that way, I guess, they're limiting their learning, but they're limiting it to what they know, what they do for a living, their vocation.
So it's a common trait of all successful people that they continuously educate themselves. Now, one of the other differences I've noticed is that the poor believe it's an either or. They believe they've got to choose between a great family and money, or you can't have love and money, or there's all those old sayings, some of them biblical, while the rich know it's not an either or. They can have it both.
Yeah, they can have it both. My research, this was a tricky one because a lot of the self-made millionaires did sacrifice. I call it delayed gratification. They sacrificed a lot in order to accumulate their wealth. And when you're pursuing success, it usually requires the expenditure of two things: time and money. So if you're starting out and you don't have a lot of money, that means you're spending a lot of time trying to build your business. Well, it comes at a cost to your family. But what the really smart self-made millionaires do is they carve out time for their family, because they're doing it for their family. They're trying to be successful, pursue a dream because they want something better for their family. So the really smart ones are the ones that are, walking that fine line and trying to balance everything out and spend time with as much time with their family as they possibly can.
I think there's two things that come out of what we've just been saying. First of all, it's our parents, the things they've said, the things we've heard, the things they did that have created our habits when we were young. And often if they were not wealthy, they would use it as an excuse. Well, you can't have love and money. It's okay that we're not rich because we can't have everything. While in fact that's not the case, you can. But the other really important point was this delayed gratification. That's clearly a trait of all successful people, whether it's actually not going straight out into the workforce when you're young and learning a trade, getting an education, getting a profession, or whether it's not spending everything on the latest smartphone now or the fanciest car now, and saving and investing, knowing that compounding in time will build your wealth. But that's really, if you haven't got the ability for delayed gratification, you're going to spend more than you earn and you'll never get rich.
No, you're right about that. Delayed gratification is really part of that component, is pushing that ball up the hill, which you and I have talked about. You're investing your time doing things that you have absolutely no idea whether they will pay off down the road. But you have this vision and you keep pushing that ball, and you hope that all the sacrifices that you're going to make are going to pay dividends down the road. And for the successful people, the ones that become wealthy, they do pay off. They have vacation homes. They can send their kids to the best colleges. They can help their kids when they get married. They can help their kids with the down payment on their first home. They can, be a part of their grandchildren's lives because they have the money to fund certain things like their grandkids' education. So yeah, there's a lot. It's a long-term view, and that's how you have to look at it.
Now, we're going through lots of these success habits, the rich habits and the poor habits, and people are thinking, well, I can't change all those habits straight away. I see some of that in me and some of the things I do right and some I don't. That's normal. We're all driving around with one foot on the accelerator and one on the brake. I guess you call it the gas there. Tom, we all exhibit some empowering beliefs and some disempowering beliefs. So you don't have to change everything, Tom, do you? Just changing some of these habits little by little will point you in the right direction.
Yeah, so I had one of my guinea pigs was a buddy of mine who was an insurance agent. And, he was doing okay in life, but he wanted to be really wealthy. And so I helped him customize a list of 10 rich habits that would specifically for him. And he called me up one day, probably 3 months later, and he said, I'm down, I'm depressed. And I said, why? What's the matter, Pat? He said, well, I've only been able to accomplish about 4 or 5 of the rich habits every single day. And I laughed. I said, boy, I've only been able to accomplish about 3 out of 10. And he said, wait a minute, you're the guy that wrote the book, Rich Habits. I said, yeah, well, it's easier said than done. I said, look, be happy with 1, 2, or 3 of those rich habits, and you'll be fine. Your life will improve incrementally every day.
Well, looking at some more of the habits then of successful people, I found that they're solution focused. Rather than looking for problems, rather than looking for obstacles, they work out how they can make lemonade out of the lemons.
Yeah, wealthy people are focused on solutions. Poor people are focused on the problems, and just looking at the problems is born of negativity. That's why it's so important to have a positive mental outlook. When you have a positive mental outlook, it opens up your entire brain. When you have a negative outlook, it shuts down part of the prefrontal cortex, which is where your decision making, your executive command and control center, and where your creativity is. So when you're negative, you don't see solutions. You see nothing but problems because your part of your brain's not operating.
Now, another part of this is that successful people, rich people, are still fearful. They are having worries. They are fearful just like everybody else, but they don't let the fear control them. They don't let themselves be limited by fear. They actually use it to empower them. So I have business problems. I have personal problems. I have other problems too. People knock me. And every time it happens, I actually think, aha, now that's going to make me better. It's going to get me to the next level rather than push me down.
Yeah. And this is because I know you, and I know that you've had struggles in your life and you overcame those struggles. And the mere fact that you had struggles that you overcame gives you kind of that safety net, that mental safety net that you could rely on and say, look, I've been down this road before. I've got through it, so I'm going to get through it again. I'm not worried about it. Yeah, sure. I have certain fears, but, I overcame all of these obstacles before. I'll overcome them again.
So you can use the fear to empower you or to disempower you. So you can want to be the best, and the fear of not being the best can empower you rather than say, oh, I just can't reach that. I can't achieve that goal, so I'm not even going to bother. Yeah,
you just don't want fear to hold you back from trying, because when you try and you overcome a fear and you try, it boosts your confidence almost immediately when you don't fail. You don't even need to succeed. You just don't need to fail, and so you become confident. You say, well, you know what? I didn't succeed, but I didn't fail. I'm going to take on more risk. I'm going to overcome more of my fears.
Because whatever it is in life, whether it's business, whether it's investments, whether it's personal development, physical fitness, personal relationships, no success is a straight line. It's up and down and back a couple of steps and then forward a couple of steps. So you've got to understand that nothing is a smooth path. Now, we've spent a lot of time researching this, and I know you've collated the information in a much more methodical way than me, and we've put it together in our joint book, Rich Habits, Poor Habits, which is an international bestseller now translated into a number of languages. So if the person listening to this, Tom, is in this podcast is interested in learning more, my recommendation to you guys is to go to richhabitspoorhabits.com and get your own copy of the book. You can get a Kindle version, you can get a PDF version, you can get a real hard copy. We still actually have our publisher print real books, or you can go on Amazon and buy it there too. So find out more. This is your opportunity to educate yourself. That's one of the traits successful people do, keep educating themselves. And I know you put a lot of effort into your daily blogs, Tom. You put out something motivational good every day. So go to richhabits.net, Tom's blog, to learn more about the Rich Habits. Tom's videos and blogs are on Property Update, my blog as well. So let's finish off with one more success habit for this podcast, but there's so many more. We're going to continue on in our monthly podcast. But I know this is one that you love, Tom, that successful people get up early. They know there's no shortcuts. So they work hard. They work hard until they've accumulated big enough business, big enough asset base so they've got choices in life. So they work hard to get to the point where they actually don't have to work hard anymore.
Yeah, this is one that, see, I'm not naturally an early riser. But for those out there who say, oh, you're either a night owl or you're a lark, I say you're wrong, because I was able to transform myself to an early riser within about 3 months. I had no choice. If I wanted to stay married and didn't want my kids to hate me, my only option was to get up at 4:30 in the morning to do my Rich Habits research. And I did that from 4:30 to about 7 in the morning. And nobody cared because everybody was sleeping. So it's important to get up early to pursue your individual goals, because by getting up early, you get ahead of the day. There's less likely that things are going to be thrown along your path because everybody's sleeping who would normally throw wrenches in your path. So you can get a lot done in the morning.
I find that the most productive time for me as well. I don't get up as early as you, and I don't go for as long a run as you. In fact, I don't go for a run. And I'll walk on the treadmill quite a few times a week. But it's, again, if you can see that that's a common trait of almost every successful person, maybe you should think, that's something I should incorporate as well. Well, boy, we covered a lot, but there are so many more success traits that let's get back together again next month for our monthly Rich Habits, Poor Habits podcast, Tom. I look forward to having a chat with you then.
Yeah, I do too, Michael. I love our little chats. Thanks.
As always, I love my chats with Tom Corley. We covered so much today, and I hope you got the picture that the big differentiator in life is that you need more of the success habits and less of the disempowering poor habits. And of course, true wealth has got nothing to do with how much money you've got. But if you want to get a financial education, if you want to get to the next level, why not get Tom and my book, Rich Habits, Poor Habits? You can get it at richhabitspoorhabits.com or on Amazon. And if you enjoyed this, let's help other people get to the next level. Let's help other people become wealthy by passing the message on, by spreading the message like Tom and I enjoy doing. So send somebody a message about this podcast. Click the share button on your podcast app. So there's some little buttons on the bottom of the iTunes app, and all the other podcast apps have a way of sharing, or send a tweet or a Facebook message. And I look forward to catching up with you with my weekly Michael Yardney podcast. And again, on the first Thursday of every month with these Rich Habits, Poor Habits podcasts.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect and pass on their wealth through strategic property advice. If you got value from today's show, we'd really appreciate it if you would leave a review, and we'll read it out on a future show, and Michael will gift you one of his books as a way of saying thank you. Just go to michaelyardneypodcast.com/review and let us know what you think. If you don't already subscribe, head over to iTunes or your favourite Android app. You'll find us there as Michael Yardney Podcast. If you'd like to gain instant access to the show notes, head across to michaelyardneypodcast.com. Watch out for our show next week. You'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success and money in around 30 minutes.